What's up YouTube, Redbeard's Garage, and today we're waking up a legend. Oh yeah! Okay, so I was fortunate enough to get my hands on a Honda Odyssey FL350. And for those that don't know what that is a two-stroke 350cc go-kart with reverse, or one-seater buggy, whatever you want to call it. Now, we found this thing sitting in a barn. Here's the original pictures from the day we found it. And sorry, they're not that great of quality. I only had my phone on me, and the barn was a little bit dim. But the guy told me about it. We was there trading on some dirt bikes, and he ended up revealing that he had this monster sitting in the barn. And I've never really looked into the Honda FL350s. Now, these things are supposed to be absolute monsters. They got fully independent suspension, reverse, electric start, headlights, the whole kit and caboodle. So today we're going to be reviving this old thing, and it's been sitting for about 6 years. He said they parked it because it needed a fuel pump. So I got a new fuel pump, new fuel lines. We're going to clean the gas tank out, clean the carburetor, and put us a new air filter on it. And let's see how mean this thing is. So let's jump right into it and get this thing done. Okay, first we're going to be taking off the air box, and we'll start there, I guess. And it's nice that it has all the old original wing nuts with it too. Okay, that's kind of what I expected to find. There's a massive rat's nest in this thing. Let me make sure y'all can get a good see on that. Okay, so that was what was inside of it. So definitely going to need an air filter. That is the air filter right there. So I'm going to grab the shop vac and get this junk vacuumed out, because I definitely don't want to be sticking my hands all up in there. Okay, now we're going to remove this old air filter metal. I'm just going to set this aside. Okay, so we've got it looks like two bolts in there to take the air box off. We're going to guess and say 10 millimeter, and we would be correct. Looks like we're going to have to take the neck loose from the carburetor to get that air box the rest of the way out. One Phillips head screw on that bad boy. That should be enough. Okay, got the air box out. So you can see the carburetor down there has the choke and the throttle cable coming in the top. You can see where the old fuel line is just completely dried up. But of course we got all new fuel line. We'll be fixing all of that. Okay, so you can see all this old fuel line right here is pretty hard. We have all new fuel line. I like the red though. It's a shame I don't have no red. But for now we're going to just remove all the old and put some new on. Right now I'm removing the rest of this snorkel. Now we're going to go ahead and pull this. This is just a breather line right here to let the fumes breathe out of that tank. And it was super dry rotted as well. And this appears to be super dry rotted and appears to be the vacuum line that works the fuel pump. So we'll get that out later. First we'll go ahead and remove this old fuel filter. Alright, so I got that old fuel filter off. We're not going to be putting an original style fuel filter on it at first. We're just going to use a lawnmower inline fuel filter. That stuff is just snapping right off. It was so dry. Okay, so we got that old fuel line off. Now we're going to go on to removing the carburetor. That all came out really nice. Nothing was seized in there. Probably gonna have to, no? Thought I'd have to get a wrench for that choke. But I did not have to. Who knows, this carburetor might actually be, I mean, really clean, but we're definitely still gonna be pulling it off. I'm gonna have to grab a flathead. Should be the last part, and this carb should come right off. Loosen that a little bit. Definitely don't want to break nothing. These are all the drain lines for overflow and things like that. Okay, now I'm going to have to see how to get the fuel tank off, because if it's set for 6 years and fuel's in it, the fuel's definitely bad. It stinks really bad. I don't know if you've ever smelled old gas before, but definitely got a smell to it. It looks like there's 4 tins on the top here. Okay, it looks like some type of bracket here is holding this. So we're going to take the bracket off from here and maybe even see if we can take this bottom bracket off, or that may be part of the fuel tank. And the fuel tank should slide right out this side right here. Alright, we got 2 different sizes there. And I will be getting all matching bolts for this when we go to putting it back together. It's going to be definitely a tight fit. Sure, this isn't the recommended way of removing this fuel tank. Nevertheless, we got it. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and start disassembling this carburetor. First, we're going to get rid of these old dry rotted lines. These are just overflow lines, and I do not have any of this style line laying around, so I will have to take a piece with me and get about 6 foot of that tomorrow. Okay, so the next thing to do is I'm going to go ahead and clean the exterior of this to make it a lot easier, so when I got it taken apart it doesn't make a mess. So let me grab some scrapers. Sure, that's old mud from 6 years ago. Now the great thing about these Odysseys is, like, when I put the Mikuni carburetor on, because I just like a Mikuni better, that I can actually sell this carburetor and pretty much pay for the Mikuni, if not make a little more out of it, because these Honda Odysseys, a lot of people want to restore them, and which I have no beef against that, but I like to have fun and have awesome stuff, so I like to modify. What I'm going to do now is take the 4 Phillips heads off of the bottom, just so I make sure I don't eat up those Phillips heads, because I have done that in the past, and then you got to notch them to fit a flathead in it, and that's just a little risky, which I've did it several times in the past. Some things are just filled completely up. I pre-loosened them off camera, which they wasn't that bad, but I'm definitely going to be replacing these screws. Seems like people like to really hammer down on carburetor screws. I don't understand why. Every carburetor I get is just ridiculously hard to get the screws out. Oh yeah, that's some good stuff there. So as you can tell, there's quite a bit of buildup. That stuff completely gummed up in there. So I'm going to definitely be soaking this in some cleaner. I'm going to take that bowl screw out right there, and that's horrible for sure. So that's a pretty good indication on what the rest of this car is going to look like. So we got to take that main jet out, and of course, this being 2-stroke, everything's super oily, so let me grab a little wrench to take that out. Okay, we got a 6mm to take that main jet out, which came out really nice actually. Yeah, it's got some buildup in it, so we'll definitely be cleaning that up. I know this flathead looks rough. It's where I've grinded it down to use just for carburetors, because I'm sure a lot of people knows out there how every flathead about doesn't fit into a carburetor. Oh yeah, big chunk came out with that one. and you can barely see through them, so it definitely would have been a definite problem. Okay, now I'm going to slide these floats off. There's a little rod sitting right inside of there. I'll zoom in for you. Okay, as you can see, that little rod going through holds the floats on. I'm going to make sure that float is cleaned really well. Yeah, and it had some gum built up on it as well. And then when you pull it out, the float needle comes right out with it. So now we can clean this thing up really well. I'm going to clean the outside up with a plastic brush and maybe some brake cleaner, making sure that I don't get brake cleaner on any type of O-rings, which I haven't seen the first O-ring actually in this thing. But nevertheless, we'll pull this thing apart and make sure we have everything really nice and clean, and then we can start assembling it back together, and we can get to cleaning that gas tank. Okay, so we got all these parts cleaned up. Now I'm going to start reassembling this. The only thing I couldn't get is you can see the discoloration on this like brass plate. It was really hard to get it clean, so hopefully some new two-stroke gas will eat that out of there. So we'll start assembling this thing. Okay, first we're going to put the main jet back in. We're going to put this little bowl back on it. Slide it right back in there. Take our 6mm and get it snug. We're going to put our secondary back in there. Okay, now we're going to put our float needle back in there. Just kind of set that down in there. Then we can slide this pin back through. As you can see how that kind of works. So now we can put the bowl back on, and she should be golden. Now I'm going to go ahead and thread these screws back on. We're going to get some new screws for it at a later date. I'm just trying to throw this thing back together tonight. Okay, we just drained all the fuel out of the tank, and it was absolutely horrible. It was pretty much brown gas, and there's all kinds of buildup in this tank. Now, how I'm going to clean this tank is I'm going to put some mineral spirits inside of it and slosh it around a lot, dump it out, do that a few times. I'll probably go through a gallon of mineral spirits through this thing, and I'm also going to be removing the petcock when we're done, and I'll probably have to replace that or rebuild it. Hopefully I don't have to, but we may have to. I'm not sure yet. We'll just have to test it out. Now you can see that my finger is fairly clean. It's got a little dirt on it. You know, you can see how much rust is built up inside of this can. That does worry me a little bit. I did want to eventually put a fuel cell up behind the head, kind of like this Odyssey right here has its fuel cell, but hopefully we can clean this out enough, and we'll be running a fuel filter. So we'll be filtering any leftover particles after we clean it, but it's definitely going to need a good cleaning. And I may throw a handful of gravel down in there to shake around to kind of bust up that stuff and give it a good long shake with that mineral spirits in there. So let's get to clean this thing out. Okay, so what I'm going to be using is some paint thinner to put inside this can and let it kind of soak while I'm finishing some other stuff on the Odyssey. So we're going to go ahead and put about a half gallon of this in there, and like I said, just let it soak, and then we'll add some gravel to it to hopefully be able to shake it around and break up some of that rust. Now I'm going to save that other half gallon so I can do a second clean on it, and hopefully be able to get all this stuff out of here. We won't be using this gas can real long, but we definitely want to use it while we're testing out everything on the go-kart and making sure everything's good, like shocks, brakes, everything like that. Okay, so I got that carburetor all cleaned up and some new lines on it. And I also went ahead and replaced this vacuum line. Now this is what runs the pulse pump, and basically the reason this engine has a pulse pump is because the gas tank is located at the same height as the engine, so gravity can't do its job and feed the engine with fuel. So we're going to slip this carburetor back on. First let's grab our hose clamp that was on there. Let me actually go grab a new hose clamp for this. Okay, we got that new hose clamp now. And we're going to slide this carburetor back on. There we go. And now I'm going to tighten up this hose clamp, and we can get on to putting the throttle cable and the choke cable back on. And probably after that, the fuel tank. I know you can't, it's really hard to show y'all what I'm doing on this because of the way this thing is built. There's really not much room to really be putting a camera and showing. Alright, that is on there now. And go ahead and slide the throttle and choke. The smaller of the two, this one is the choke cable. And it just slides right in there and threads right in until it's pretty much tight. And then same thing with this is how the throttles work. They don't have a butterfly on dirt bikes and four-wheelers. And it does go on a certain way. Just look down in your carb and you'll see that there's a lip for this thing to fall down into. Sometimes you have to stick your hand in there and guide that needle where it needs to go before everything will fall back down into place. Make sure everything is good and tight. Now, I haven't adjusted this carb any different because if it ran fine before we mess with it, then of course it should be fine the way it is. Okay, so we got the air box and the carburetor all put back on, and I went ahead and changed the spark plug as well, and it had a one-step hotter plug in it, which is in the manual says to use that plug during the winter time. So I kept it because it was actually in really good shape, and put the one it's supposed to have in it. So we'll just run the one-step hotter if it's 41 or below. Yeah, we still need to get a battery. I'm probably going to pick one of those up tomorrow, and still have to change the oil in the transmission, and also the engine has a very small amount of oil we're going to change. We went ahead and bled the rear brake, and we got a bunch of old nasty fluid out of it. So what we're probably going to have to do is ride it just a little while, and then we can bleed it again and hopefully get the rest of that junk out of there. As you can see, we pulled the seat out. And I had to do that to get to the vacuum line. It's really hard to see. And I had to also take off this torque converter. There's a torque converter guard in there. Sorry for the bright light. That piece of metal with the sticker on it. So we had to pull out this piece of metal there, which is a torque converter guard, to get to that vacuum line. So we got it all put back in. We're waiting for the air filter to come in the mail. So I went ahead and focused my attention to the fuel lines. Now, I already got all the fuel lines pre-cut that run from the tank to the fuel filter. And basically, the schematic, I printed out the shop manual for this book. For this FL350. You can see that's the fuel diagram. Has this little check valve right there, and it still works just fine. Actually, it's right here already on some fuel lines. So I'm going to get all this mocked up. But in the meantime, I have to actually cut a piece of metal out to make an adapter to bolt this fuel pump, which is basically a metal pulse pump is all this is, to bolt it in the original spot, because it had like a weird shaped pulse pump that was located right there on that bracket. So what I'm doing now is making this new bracket that will bolt down in the original spot. So I'm going to get this cut out and I'll show you how that's going to work. Okay, so there's my little adapter I made. So basically it's bolted down to the original spot, and I've welded these bolts sticking up so the pulse pump can sit right there, and then of course some nuts will go on each side. Now, to keep this from moving around or rattling, what I'm going to do is put some of this foam sticky tape that's sticky on one side. I have a roll of it laying somewheres, and that'll keep it from making any noises, and also from being metal to metal contact. So this is the foam I was talking about. A lot of people use it to go under tonneau covers on trucks to keep from eating up the side of their bed. So we're going to put a little strip of this on there and then bolt that pulse pump down. Okay, so I got that fuel tank all slid in place. Let me tell you, that thing is not fun sliding in and out. You can see where I mounted the pulse pump. Now this is the vacuum line coming from the block that provides vacuum for a turbine in that pump, which in return pumps fuel from that side and pushes it out this. Then it has a check valve right here that runs in the top of the tank, and it's going to kind of be bent over like that. And this is going to run down to the carburetor. I actually ran out a 1/2 inch fuel line. I need to get some more of that and 2 more of these vacuum line clips. Those will be fine for the fuel. It shouldn't have enough pressure to leak, I wouldn't imagine. So I kind of made me an air filter until the actual filter gets here. What I did was put electrical tape to shut that top off, and then put one of my go-kart pre-filters around it. So that should be good enough just to hear it run and, you know, get it all tuned in while we're waiting on the air filter to get here. So pretty much it's put that last fuel line on, fill the tank up with gas, and she should be ready to fire. Pretty excited to see if this thing runs. You know, it's always scary buying something and not hearing it run. Okay, so I got the new fuel lines on, the new air filter, the new spark plug, and the only thing we did so far is prime the fuel filter and get gas in the lines. So she's ready to start. So keep your fingers crossed. I got to, for some reason the starter button isn't working, probably some bad contacts most likely. So I will need to go through all the wiring on this, all the connections, and but we're gonna start it off of the starter solenoid for now. Start. gosh. Kick it in gear. Ready? Oh gosh. Hey, hey, woo! The cops was just right there. Okay, so what do you think of the Odyssey?
It is freaking sweet. By far the funnest thing we have so far.
Trey, your take?
It sucks.
The turning radius does suck, which I knew that getting it. Everybody said pretty much the turning radius on this thing you get a little bit, which I think I can do a few modifications to give some more turning radius. I think there's some little quick fixes online. I do got to get those front brakes bled, don't you think? And the rear needs bled a little bit more.
Still not very good either.
She's got all the power you want though. I think it runs about 50.
Without any rear.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, if we had no brakes, you'd be dead. So Trey, rate it 1 to 10.
12.
1 to 10.
8.
We had to cut our ride a little short because the popos was coming. I don't know if they was coming for us, but they was coming towards us. So